I presented those 150 images 44 times to different editors and directors over 10 days. And I wound up in the God of Photography's office, which is the director of photography at National Geographic, with the assistant director. And they looked at my images through a big saucer loop, like a really large loop. After an hour and a half, I went back and met the managers, the vice president who'd been helping me get the meetings. And she said, "Where have you been?" And I said, "I was in the corner office." And she said, "For how long?" And I said, "An hour and a half." And she said, "The previous record was like 7 minutes." And I went, "Okay, that's either good or bad." And the very next day I sat down with the vice president, and she slid across a pile of paperwork, and on the top of that pages was the word contract. And my life went from me disappearing into countries and catching every disease. We should do a disease section of this, but going through all of those sorts of trials and tribulations and spending literally every cent I had and walking out the door on crying partners and everything, not being cruel, but just that desire for so many years. I was suddenly sitting in the hallowed halls of National Geographic with a pile of paperwork and the word contract on it.
Jason, welcome. Pleasure to have you on the podcast. Jason, where are you? What do you do? Who are you? Tell me everything about yourself in 15 seconds.
Well, g'day, mate. My name's Jason Edwards, and I have been a photographer since my early teenage years, and for the past 23 years, a photographer for National Geographic. I'm currently sitting in Marrakesh, Morocco, where I'm concluding a National Geographic assignment, where I've been in 8 or 9 countries in Africa for this hop. So it's nice and toasty outside, and the hair and the face are very exhibitive of someone who has not had much sleep in about the last 7 weeks.
Well, I assure you, my friend, there are a whole bunch of people who are seeing this right now who wish they were sitting in the heat in Morocco and not having sleep for a few days. So, there are a lot of benefits coming from that outweigh the hair that comes along with it.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. It's fair to say that I very much acknowledge on a daily basis the privilege of my career and the opportunities that it provides me. I'm very, very aware of that, given the places that I work around the world in all countries, and also that I know that people do many different things in their careers that don't give them the joy that I find in mine. So I wake up in the morning very aware of that and grateful for it.
How long have you been living this particular Nat Geo world hopping lifestyle?
Yeah. I started shooting when I was 8. So I borrowed my mum's old Kodak canister camera. And ironically, the first photos I ever took were at Melbourne Airport. I live in Melbourne. I'm based there when I'm there, and we went to the main airport, Tullamarine. And back in those days, they let kids on the tarmac, ironically. And so my first photos were of a Pan Am, a literally Pan American airline. We're looking up with this Kodak camera, and then they took us inside the plane, and I took a photo out through the window. Little did I know that a long time after that, I would be spending much of my life looking out at exactly that window. So when I was 14 or 15, my grandmother went to Hong Kong on a holiday. I had $250 in my account that I'd saved from delivering papers. And I said to my grandmother, "Can you please bring me back a camera?" And she was quite shocked, but I'd always painted and drawn. People thought I was going to be the next Dali. I was very, very committed to the creative arts as well as the sciences. And I was walking to school one day, and I had an epiphany that I wanted to make images for the rest of my life. 3 months later, Gran is sitting there getting on a plane with my $250. She returned with a Cassina CT7, which was a film camera, but the first electronic camera at the time, a 50mm lens and a flash. I photographed my friends at school, as people do now, and I was fortunate. I went to a great school. I had pictures published off my 3rd roll of film, and that was it. I was hooked. There was no, I don't want to do exhibitions. I don't want to do anything. I want to do editorial. I want to see my images in whatever format I can do. And it was every moment I could shoot from that point moving on whilst I was at high school. But then I was offered straight out of high school, and this is probably going to freak a few people out because it's statistically it's not high, but I was offered a position as a zookeeper at Melbourne Zoo. And so Melbourne Zoo is the second oldest zoo in the world to London. I was there for 12 and a half years, 8 of which was the big cat keeper. I worked with carnivores, leopards, tigers, lions, or bears, all of those sorts of things. And then I spent another 4 years, 4.5 years working with primates, gorillas, orangutans, and so forth. So we can dive into that psychosis if you like, but it was during that time that I did my tertiary studies, which were actually in animal sciences, not in photography. I was self-taught. And yeah, I mean, do you want me to keep going down that track, or have you got any questions on that? It's hard to know. I mean, basically, the two most statistically sought after jobs in the world are apparently zookeeper and National Geographic photographer. And I found myself connected to both of those institutions. So to jump a gap between the zoo and then winding up in the hallowed halls of the Golden Rectangle, I've been with National Geographic since 2001. Was when they contracted me. And you know, there's a gap between obviously starting at the zoo and that point. Happy to go down that path if you'd like. But it's been yeah, it's been 23 years, almost 24 years now that I've been traveling the world for them. But that's not where my travel began. That's not where my photographic travel career began. Began many years before that. Yeah.
Well, you certainly have quite the CV. I've only heard two of the jobs on it, but I can tell that it's definitely an outlier. So why don't you go ahead and tell the story of fill in the blank between zookeeper and National Geographic.
Yeah. So I mean, one of the things that was different for me as a child is that when I was drawing and painting, I was very much concerned about the elements that did not belong rather than the elements that did belong. Most creative people will do their compositional constructions the other direction to what I do. So I don't know if that's how I saw the world. My mum would always say that she was concerned, even now, that I never had a childhood because I'd be happy to sit there talking to adults at 5 years of age at a dinner party. But I was very curious about the world. And so as I created that imagery, when I started at the zoo, it was one of those things that it gave me the opportunity, for all the obvious reasons, to be around wildlife, and that was my passion. But I went through a particularly academic school, to be honest, the most academic school in the country. And I was bright, I get as a student. I like school. You can't buy your way in. There's no familial entry. It's one entrance exam, and people, boys from around the world and girls, we have a sister school, they sit the one entrance exam and they take 180 students from Australia or around the world. I was accepted. I was very fortunate. Working class family. My father was a long haul truck driver. My mother was a waitress. We barely had 2 cents to scratch together, but they made it work for me, and I worked hard whilst I was there. And the school was all about being the person that you wanted to be. You know, for 154 years, that's what they did. Didn't matter that all the students were intellectually above average, maybe, I guess, but it was, what do you want to do with your life? And so I was set free, Jace. I was set free by my parents. You know, my dad always said, I don't care if you sweep streets, just work hard doing it. And my mum was very intellectually gifted, but she became a mum. And so all of that intellectual stimulation came from her. So when I started at the zoo, I started photographing the animals in my care. And I didn't walk around with the camera all the time because I couldn't. I was a zookeeper, which is lots of cleaning and scrubbing and manual labor, long days. But it did give me opportunities to learn about animal behavior. And as I said, I did my multiple degrees whilst I was there at the zoo. So applied science. My postgrad was in applied science. My main degree was in applied science in animal sciences. I did a 4-year zookeeping degree. So everything was based around wildlife and conservation. When I earned the money from the zoo, I used every cent of that to fund trips and buy film and buy lenses and buy equipment. And so I started out like everyone who picks up a camera did. I bought a secondhand $60 wide angle lens from my curator at the zoo, a $50 macro lens. You know, I just trial and error. There was no internet, no Google, nothing. I shot a roll of Kodak Gold 100 print film, learned from the mistakes, set the settings on the camera, photograph books in a bookcase to learn about depth of field. You know what it's like creatively. You need to understand how depth works in an image. And I found that my passion for it was exponentially growing. I got called into the curator. Zoos are old structures. They're like National Geographic, you know, they're societies. So I was called into the curator's office one day, German curator, and he said, I want to talk to you about your photography. And I thought I was getting the sack, or, you know, I was a young guy, you know, going out too often, money in my pocket, all of those things. And he'd been a well-known photographer in Germany, in Cologne. And he said, you do things with a camera I can't do, but this is what I need you to do. I need you to see the world in 24 by 36, the shape of 35mm photography. And the look on my face was obviously that as of a teenager going, yep, yep, yep. But he pushed through, he tolerated it, and we wound up in a scenario where he said, it will take you 6 to 9 months before you see the world with the dotted lines in portrait orientation and in landscape orientation. And he said, if you do that, the world will change for you photographically because you are on that journey. So I did. I actually then, that's all I saw. I consciously walked around through life, shopping centers, time with my partners, driving the car, working with animals. I physically forced myself to see those dotted lines. And then my photography changed. You know, I couldn't turn it off eventually. He was right, 6 or 9 months later. And so then the zoo would get requests for calls for imagery. Do you have a picture of a wolf or this or that or whatever? And they didn't have an archive. So they would say, we've got this young guy, Jace, here. You know, here's his phone number. Give him a call. And I would go and shoot the things that they needed if I didn't have it in my archive. And so I'd go and shoot it and give the people the pictures. And suddenly my work was being published in science journals and the odd educational book. And then one day, one of the press photographers, there was always press photographers in the zoo, said to me, you need to switch to slide film, to color transparency. That's how old I am. He said, because you'll get better reproduction, all of those sorts of things. And I thought, this is interesting. I need a platform by which to market my work globally, or at least domestically initially. So I spent 6 months of my zoo salary on a copyright lawyer. I did as much research as I could before then. We're still very much strong friends decades later, the lawyer and I. He's still my lawyer. And
Always
we
good to be
designed,
friends with a lawyer.
that's right, especially one that knows your psychological foibles. But I sacrificed, you know, I sacrificed 6 months of my salary. We built an absolute brutal contract. Because it was slides, I was giving them the actual film. But the most important thing in that contract was they must publish my name, because there was no internet, no Google, nothing. And so I just went, let's make this real. So I registered a business called Bio Images. Bio is Latin for all living things. And everything I could possibly shoot, I shot. I just day and night. And then I got more and more requests. And then the books or the magazines would write Jason Edwards Bio Images. And so my career started off, and literally by not osmosis, it was a conscious decision. But during those 12 years at the zoo, I built a stock agency only representing my own work. And it was tough. I mean, it was tough. I was working a full-time role at the zoo. I was working every morning tea, lunchtime, and afternoon tea on the business whilst I was at the zoo. I would get home, I'd work for 3 or 4 hours, a couple of hours, then I would have dinner with my partner. We would watch the X-Files, and then she would go to bed and I would work until 3 in the morning. And I would do that 7 days a week. And I did not take a day off in 10 years. And as you can imagine, that was brutally hard on my partners, brutally hard, of which I came home to empty houses a couple of times, including the furniture was gone. But that was the only way I could see to do it. And so I would use my time off in the zoo and the money I earned to fund travel overseas. If there was something that interested me, I would book a ticket and I would go. We had a strange roster, so I could pair time together, or I would take off for a month or something like that. And I was relentless in my passion. It wasn't about fame. It wasn't about fortune. It was driven solely by my curiosity of the world. I've got an insatiable curiosity about your species. I'm a watcher of the human condition. but also too, every species ecosystem is of interest to me. Cultures are of interest, more so as I've gotten older. But I used those 12 years to the point where Jason Edwards disappeared and bioimages began. And so people would call up bioimages, not realizing that I was the engine behind it, which is the case with so many small businesses. People don't realize that there's one person or one or two people or whatever behind this whole thing that has a much larger presence. And I was that one thing. There wasn't anyone else.
I
And
can strongly relate to that statement, I assure you.
and but it was also it came at a lot of cost to family and friends and other elements of my life, because I was taking off by myself. You know, I was going to countries where there weren't maps in those countries, and I would land and pop out 8 countries later in South America or in Africa or something like that. So my desire, I have very little genetic self-preservation, DNA active in my body. So I would take off, I would do that. And eventually though, I lost a relationship that was very, very important to me, and I decided that enough's enough. I can't keep doing 3 concurrent roles. It's cost me too much. So I quit the zoo, and my partner actually at the time worked for the zoo, so we were very close and we worked together. So I left the zoo and thinking I would find more time in my life, but you don't. You know, you fill that time with more travel or more planes or whatever the case might be. But I had by that point built a brand, and some magazines had been reaching out to me saying, Jace, can you do this? So it always begins. If people wonder how it begins, here's the model. Someone calls you and they say, we need you to do a 1-hour shoot or a 2-hour shoot. My first 2-hour shoot for Australian Geographic, not related to National, was a sea snake that someone had brought into the aquarium, and it was dying, and it was a new species. Can you go down there and photograph it for us? So I raced to town in my 4-wheel drive, parked the car where they told me to, went in, photographed the snake. It looked alive, then it died. I came back out, my car had been towed. I had a $360 fine, plus I had to buy the car back out of the pound. I only made $400 on the job or something, and I burned about 800 doing the job. So I went, wow, I'm fantastic at business. But you get the 2-hour job right, then you get a 4-hour job. You get a 4-hour job right, you get a 1-day job. 2 days, 3 days, 3 weeks, a month, whatever the case might be. So I didn't get any preferential treatment when I started working with different companies. That's the road I was on. It's the only road there is, unless you, in today's social media world, it's a little bit different, but that's how you got more work. After maybe, let me do the math, maybe 12 years of me running bioimages and shooting for other magazines, I thought, I'm going to call National Geographic. I didn't feel I was ready before then. Most creatives, as you would know better than I am, are very hard on themselves. It's a trait for when you're a creative person, and self-doubt walks hand in hand with creativity. But I called reception. I literally cold called them, and the receptionist went, hello. And I said, hi, it's Jason. Can I speak to someone in wildlife photography at National Geographic magazine? And the lady said, oh, please hold Jason, and put me on hold for 4 or 5 minutes. And then she came back and she said, what's your name, Jason? And I said, Jason Edwards. She said, I'll transfer you now. And I got put through to the then director of wildlife photography at National Geographic. And her opening line was, we've been waiting for you to call. And
That's
that was
got to be a uplifting thing to hear from National Geographic.
It was one of those life moments. Jason, what's your story? I pitched my story. Please send us some images, color transparencies, of course, slide film. I sent them across. They looked at them. Go and shoot some more. No money, nothing, go and shoot some more. I did another 4 shoots, sent all of that material across. They said, look, we'd like to break this up. It doesn't fit our publishing schedule, because they work 12 months, 18 months in advance, but we'd like to put some in the magazine. And if you would like to come to Washington, DC and bring 100, we like you, come to Washington and bring 150 frames that you think tell your career to this point. Now I'm in my 20s or something at this point. How would one even know? But I booked a ticket myself, picked 150 frames. Which ones did I select? some that I knew magazines and publishers liked, others that no one had understood before, but I liked. Got on the plane, I presented those 150 images 44 times to different editors and directors over 10 days. And I wound up in the God of Photography's office, which is the director of photography at National Geographic, with the assistant director. And they looked at my images through a big saucer loop, like a really large loop. After an hour and a half, I went back and met the managers, the vice president who'd been helping me get the meetings. And she said, "Where have you been?" And I said, "I was in the corner office." And she said, "For how long?" And I said, "An hour and a half." And she said, "The previous record was like 7 minutes." And I went, "Okay, that's either good or bad." And the very next day I sat down with the vice president, and she slid across a pile of paperwork, and on the top of that pages was the word contract. And my life went from me disappearing into countries and catching every disease. We should do a disease section of this, but going through all of those sorts of trials and tribulations and spending literally every cent I had and walking out the door on crying partners and everything, not being cruel, but just that desire for so many years. I was suddenly sitting in the hallowed halls of National Geographic with a pile of paperwork and the word contract on it. And with that contract and her hand still on it, she said, "This is what's going to happen in your life." And she gave me a litany of disasters, from more illness to more divorces, to more this, to more that, to everything, to you will shoot a story for 5 years and we will not publish it. And then we'll scream at you and you will cry, and all of these things, all of which have happened, Jason, in my life. They've all happened. But I was in it. I was young. I was the youngest photographer at the time. There's always someone that's the youngest, and I was the youngest, and my career changed in ways I couldn't have imagined at that point. So,
How many photographers do you think take a shot at National Geographic every year?
wow, beyond the thousands, I wouldn't even know how many. I think one of the interesting things with digital, the advent of digital in photography or any creative element that involves digital now, is that people have, and I say this humbly to people who might be photographers who are listening to this, but when I was younger, the film was so brutal that you had to learn to read light, and film was expensive. So you learnt your craft by trial and error. Kodachrome was one third of a stop out. Your shadows were gone, your highlights were gone. Now with digital, people are really good at, the cameras are so forgiving that now, to answer your question, is that people take these pictures and then they think this is National Geographic because they post-produce their images to look like National Geographic. But Nat Geo don't care about the post-production. They do their own. If it's for the magazine or something, they don't care. Your skills mean zero to them in post-production, zero. The raw file, and we all shoot in raw, is the only way to get in the door. So a lot of people that approach them, I think, just from what I've been told and my personal experience, I think a lot of people are approaching them before they're ready to actually tell the stories that Geographic need told. And they're relying on their ability to create wonderful product from imagery that maybe isn't the sort of imagery that would normally get through the gate. And so a lot of people do that, and they're, unfortunately, they don't realize that they may well be perfect candidates for Geographic, but you have to take your time. Some people walk right in the door and they are suddenly in the door and they get resources and they get everything, and they get elevated and all of the things that Geographic can do. But that's very uncommon. It doesn't happen often. So I wouldn't want to put a number on it, but what I can tell you is that as far as I said before, statistically, it's the most sought after role in the creative arts in the world. It's one of those things that there's a billion people who want your job at any given point. It's the dream job of every photographer or writer potentially, but definitely every photographer on the planet. So, but most people also don't realize what it entails. I mean, it's a life. It's not a job. And most people who are successful at things, rightly or wrongly, their career becomes so much, often it's who they are, not what they do. If you're one of these people who can start a corporation and you're very good at managing that and you're incredibly successful, that's amazing. But if you're a creative, it's normally who you are, not what you do. Or what you do is who you are, is a better way to put it. And so there's no weekends off when you're working. There's no finishing it after an 8-hour day or a 6-hour day. I stay up for days. I mean, I got a couple of hours sleep last night, but I was up for 3.5 days before that on a work in progress deadline on this shoot. And I'm still shooting every day and creating. I mean, there's no weekends, there's no holidays with your partner. There's no, people say to me, I'm going on assignment and I'm going to here, and my partner's coming with me. And I go, fantastic. But you get up early while they're having a sleep in, and then you lie by the pool, and then you go out during the golden hour. No, that's not an assignment.
Yeah, you go out
You
and
know,
get malaria, and you come
oh,
home, you stay in the bathroom for about 7 hours and pass out, and yeah.
well, to put that last comment into perspective, I was in West Papua doing underwater work about 6 weeks ago. When I came out of West Papua, very remote reefs, best reefs in the world, I got giardia, the gastrointestinal disorder, which I've had about 20 times. But I had that for 2.5 weeks. So every time I ate, I purged. I had one good day of health, and then I went and stupidly, rookie mistake, went and had vaccine updates that I'd forgotten, jumped on a plane, had an adverse reaction because I was immunocompromised. And I spent the first 2.5 weeks of this assignment fighting off, I had bronchitis and then fighting off pneumonia with drugs, more drugs than you can poke a stick at, because I was just run down. I'm going shoot to shoot to shoot. Not a complaint, not like anything of that, but the diseases and the, bilharzia, brucellosis, malaria, swine flu, bird flu, MERS. MERS has a fatality rate of 85%. The only reason it doesn't kill the whole planet is you get so sick so quickly, you're not mobile, but these sorts of diseases, shattered limbs, my back of my head stitched on, broken bones, fingers cut off, dislocated vertebrae in my neck, I am a walking, talking cesspool of disease and bodily injury. I've had insects living behind eyeballs that turned me blind. On this trip, I had to get a doctor to look inside my ear because I was positive there was lava crawling its way into my brain because the fever was just screwing with my head. And it's all fantastic. It's like, it's all fantastic, but it's not for everyone.
You go to a foreign country, you get an illness that most people would, use all of their vacation and sick days to get through before they go back to work. But I presume you go and shoot when that happens to you.
I don't stop. Yeah, there's been very few times in my life where I've actually been forced to stop, and then I've been really, really unwell in the field. So, I mean, there's an old saying that was told to me when I signed the contract: make images, not excuses. There was no excuse that I could give. I was told that would be adequate enough to satisfy an editorial miss. That's what it was. And I mean, I tore a hole in my abdominal wall one year, and I stayed on the road with anti-inflammatories and whiskey. I mean, literally, I love whiskey, or I don't drink it anymore. We had too much of a love affair. But I had this giant bulge coming out of my abdomen, and I was so tender, but I had so many shoots, and I was bouncing in less developed countries. And finally, I found African wild dog in an area that I'd never seen them before. They're critically endangered species. I've got my team there. And to be quite biologist background kind of side of thing, I'm vomiting and purging down below simultaneously whilst I'm shooting the dogs. My body's a wreck. I can't touch myself. I'm in so much pain. And Chris said, we've got to get you out on a plane. This is not a good thing. And the shoot finished the next day, not because of that. I stayed through it. But when I got back to Australia and I went in to have all the cameras and everything put through my body, when the surgeons came out, they went, you get like a couple of days left until you die. It's the anti-inflammatories have kept your stomach lining open. The bacteria have got in there. The whiskey feeds the sugar to the bacteria. You've rotted your stomach from one side to the other, and you've just been hiking with, in 100 pound of camera gear on your back 7 days a week for the last 18 months, and and they said, something's got to give, we need to get you alive, so, so it's a great question, because it's one of the things that people don't realize. Mobile phones have helped, most definitely, but it's not like I'm going around the corner to an office, or I'm flying to Sydney if I'm in Melbourne or wherever I am, and my partner knows where my wife Megs or my son Will, that they don't know where I am. They might have an idea of where I am, or I disappear. And it used to be much harder for relationships in the past, of course. But if I get sick, I have to have that ability to maintain myself, or work with people in Indigenous communities or remotely, wherever I am, to try and stay on the ground. But to my own devastation physically, sometimes I will keep going and shoot, because it's a big commitment to the money and the time and the faith that an organization is giving in you to get the story done. I mean, I know a lot of photographers, even those at Nat Geo, who don't see it that way, but maybe, they're more confident in their own skin than I am or something. But it's a lifestyle that is a humbling privilege at the greatest expense of your own, for me, the work I do, of your own physical well-being, mental well-being, your emotional well-being, and potentially those around you, depending on how well you manage to succumb to the transition between home and the field. And that's changed for me over the years since I became a dad.
You have a hole in your abdomen wall, and you're not pretty close to a hospital, particularly if you're somewhere you've hiked, you could die a really, really excruciating death from that. That it'd be a bad way to go.
It's a
So
bad way to go.
yeah,
Yeah.
just like the purging from both ends, as your euphemism. That's bad, and that's really uncomfortable, and that would be enough to put most of us down, but that's nothing compared to what would happen if some of your guts went out of that hole. So
Yeah. Yeah. And
I'm
whiskey and anti-inflammatories are not the cure. For all
right.
the for all the kids out there, that's not the cure.
Well, thank you
Yeah.
for conducting your independent medical study on that. We've got the answer for that one now.
Yeah.
Um, well, your you you your story is one of juxtaposing your your humanness, the frailty of your physical body, but also the delicacy of personal relationships and the very limited resource that we all have of time on Earth. All of that's kind of on one side of the pile. And then on the other side of the pile is your work, or more important, more specifically, maybe your awareness of what you're capable of accomplishing
Mm.
with your talent, with your experience, with your perception, with the time that you have a sense that you can accomplish something really powerful and meaningful. Am I going out on a limb by making that observation?
No, not at all. One thing I'd say before I respond, I guess, as a quantifier, is that I think a lot of the ways people perceive those elements of themselves is often comes from how people grow up, how the environment around them treats them, or the people that are in their lives treat them, or how they treat themselves. And for me, I mean, I love my childhood. Like any childhood, there was ups and downs, and some highs and some big lows, and all of those sorts of things. What I what I think, and that's a fantastic question. I think I've probably never been asked that in my career in that context. And when I was drawing and painting and shooting in my early part of my career, much of what I was doing, especially in the illustration space, was not something that a lot of people understood, the way I was interpreting the world around me, or the things that I was creating. My mother actually once had me remove human genitalia from an abstract picture I was doing. And then when she had the parent teacher night, my art teacher, and again, I went to a very good school, just tore my mother to shreds and said, never touch his artwork again. You have no idea where this boy's brain is. You know, I don't even know where it's going, and what it is, it's wonderful. I think that's the first time maybe the last time that my mum's ever apologized to me. No, I say that jokingly, mum, if you ever watch this. But but you know, to your point, I think it's one of those scenarios where when you are working, whatever you're working on, especially in the creative side of it, it's almost impossible. I would say 1% of creative people have it in themselves to turn around and say, I'm fantastic. Everything I produce is fantastic. This is worth $100,000 and this is worth this and all of those sorts of things. Some of those people are really good at doing it and they're bluffing, and some of them actually believe it. For the other 99% of us, myself included, every day is a roller coaster ride of self-doubt, potentially self-loathing. You know, what am I doing? Nothing here is worthy that I've created, or something like that. I have the benefit, and it is a wonderful benefit, of the career path I chose in natural history. You know, getting into wild places is a poultice for the soul anyway. So yes, I had limited money when I was funding everything myself, and now I've got limited time and still limited resources because Geographic doesn't have all the money that it wants. People might think I have 3 weeks somewhere. I have 3 hours, you know, but the environments that I'm placed in, or that I choose to place myself in, are uplifting or interesting, or even if they're soul destroying and heartbreaking, I am so immersed in that environment emotionally and creatively that I want to do the best that I can. So I extrapolate myself so wholeheartedly that if I look at my career, I often look at my career in the third person, because any single assignment that I have done, or any single day, sometimes it's any single day, I get to the end of a day and I go, that was just, and look, I mean, I've got goosebumps just even putting myself in this space, you know, mentally now. Any one trip or any one day could be someone else's life dream. Did I document it well? My philosophy is it better or different? Is every frame better or different? Even if I've never been there before, I'm not like this. I'm not interested in that. I'm an old full film guy. I'll still shoot a lot in digital, and I still shoot film, just for the record. On every assignment, I still shoot film. But creatively, it's what can I do? How can I immerse myself in this moment and then translate that to someone who wasn't there? That's how seriously I take my job. I know that so few people are going to have those opportunities that I have, nor in some cases would they want them. So for me, I wear the burden. I'm built like a gorilla. Part of my burden that I take is that I have to help educate people. I help teach, break down barriers between cultures, help people understand that all poachers are not bad poachers. They're just trying to feed children, or whatever the case might be. Or sometimes it's just a beautiful habitat, and there's ice falling into glaciers in Antarctica, or whatever the case might be. But that's still, I can't just sit there and do this. I have to translate that better or different, better or different, better or different than anyone else in the world, but also too in my brain. Because I feel like if I don't do that well, I will spiral. You know, I love it. I love what I do. I'm a glasses half full kind of guy. But if I feel like I've let that desire down, I'm pretty hard on myself. You know, I mean, sometimes you just don't get the right light, or the animal doesn't come, or the people don't want you there, or the temple is closed, or whatever the case might be. There's a million and one of those stories. But if I'm in the environment and I don't see the shot, or I think I've let the potential for what I've created can't achieve what I wanted it to create, I can't unsee what I've seen. And that is, I'm eidetic when it comes to the frames I've taken. So it's that, I don't know, I apologize if I haven't answered your question, but it's one of those things that it's more, you know, I feel like I'm blessed in the sense that I was a young person who knew what they wanted to do, and then had enough skill to forge a career out of it through a lot of hard work and a lot of sacrifices. But most people of all ages don't know what they want to do. You know, I class myself as truly blessed that came into my life, because I went to that school to become an Air Force pilot. I was in the Air Corps. I went to the bases. I went on the planes, all of that sort of thing. All that study, I burnt my eyes out. I became a little bit, you know, they can't take you when that's the case. But I had this equal passion moving forward. all this art and this science. And, one of my first letters to Father Christmas was, please, can I have a book on all the animals on the planet and the ecosystems that they live in. And I got Walt Disney's World of Nature and McDonald's Ecosystems of the World or something. It became my most read book, and then I went on, I managed through divine intervention, the God of photography, hard work, whatever, to find a place for myself where I could create and hopefully change people's lives who don't have those opportunities.
There are parallels with that experience with the other people who are world champions and people who have devoted their lives to something that we've spoken to. And my perception of that and the perception of the people through history whose lives that I've studied and whose work that I've admired is that um, there's there's a spark of greatness in some of these lives that pop up on Earth. And when that spark catches and when its light can be seen, it becomes a burden to the bearer because
Mm.
you have a light inside of you and you see the light, and that light is cast out on everything that you see in the world. It paints the world in a way that other people don't see it. And when you've been lucky enough to be in a position where you can practice a skill that applies that spark of greatness and it can become developed, I think you get to a place where you understand you've got to hold that light up. And that is, you're doing it not for yourself, you're doing it for the whole world. Maybe you're doing it even for history. Maybe it's you feel a sense of responsibility for what you will leave behind. And for you, that's very literal. You're a painter of light, as they used to say. You're somebody who's truly translating the visual world in revealing meaning in the visual world to other people. But the I'm where I'm rambling to with that is that for all of the people that I've talked to in that position, it's come with really serious sacrifice, really, really serious sacrifice. And that is the burden of it. That's earlier when I was talking about how there are two things that you wrestle with. There's like the practicality of life and being comfortable and experiencing love and, you know, being able to rest and relax and not being called and pulled in a thousand directions. But then there's that persistent, ever present awareness that you have work to do while you're here and get it done.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to end that with a question. What I want to say is that already um it's been motivational and inspiring to me just to get that insight from you to show the way you thought about it and the way you had to make those decisions, or it sounds like maybe not make decisions at certain times and just act. But
Yeah.
do you feel a certain responsibility for yourself for what you can do?
Very, very much so. I mean, it's so I did a couple of nights ago, I did a presentation here in Marrakesh, and and I showed some people the work I've just created, the work in progress, an example of it. And everyone in the room, including the staff at the hotel, everyone was crying, and they're what you could hear a pin drop. And as much as I've made people cry in the past for the wrong reasons, that's the right reason, where people were sitting there going, "Oh my God, is that how you've just seen this experience that you've just had," including the part of the team who were there. And so for me, I was just, even in that small example, it was like, okay, so I've created something that now has a butterfly effect, that when that work goes on to those people or however it gets disseminated, I know for a fact that that work's going to be reaching multi-generations in those people's families. And one of the things that when I became a dad, one of my bosses at Geographic said, we were very close. She liked me. She said, I just don't want you to be, this job is so hard. I don't want you to be like other people in the organization who never knew their children. So I can't pay you to do it, but I want you to stay home for a couple of years and go through your archives. What did we miss? Things like that. My wife, we did some things with the bank to put mortgages on hold and everything. So my wife had 20 months off. I stayed home for the first couple of years to be with Will. And then when my wife went back to work, she works in the corporate sector. I didn't even really start traveling again then. You know, I had to make that decision, you know, so it was like Will and I with a latte set at kindergarten. You know, we'd turn up mid-morning or whatever and we'd hang out. When he went to elementary school, which was around the corner from our house, and I was fortunate I could make these decisions, sacrificed my time. I became friends with his teachers and we would have a drink at the pub every Friday afternoon. It makes me sound like an alcohol, whiskey and pub, doesn't it? But I'm Australian and that's just how it
Right.
is.
You're Australian,
But
so it's kind of mandatory
fine.
from what I
Yeah,
understand. Yeah.
it's pretty mandatory. But you know, I was there all the time. I made those decisions to make sure I didn't miss those opportunities, which many people can't make those choices. And many men cannot make those choices. And to that burden question, the reason I tell that story, I would never regret that. I had, you know, Will and I are so unbelievably close, but that public perception of what I do, I've had people come up who in presentations, people who don't even know me, people I've been hosting for dinner, and tell me that I'm a terrible person, that I'm a bad father, I'm a bad husband, and just sinking the boots into me. And they don't, you have done this, you have done that, you know, because that public perception, some people are aware of how much work it takes, but you don't share everything about your private life even when you're in the public domain. But I'm a sensitive kind of guy, and that, you know, I remember once I called home to Australia and said to my wife, I said, am I a bad father? You know, it's like, yeah, I was sobbing. I was sobbing. I was broken. I was in the field. I was tired. I was exhausted. I'd had diseases. And she went, what are you talking about? And she was so angry. And she said, you know, Will and I have been traveling with you since he was 6 months of age. So they come with me sometimes into the field to do geographic shoots. I've made that happen. But that burden that comes with every time you pick up the camera, the golden rectangle is hovering above, just hovering above, that every frame I'm going to get is going to be cover worthy or some world first or whatever the case, or did I make it beautiful enough or did I make it this or whatever. And I take it so incredibly seriously that, you know, and Geographic knows this, but no one, you know, I'm creating a space down the coast at the moment for family and friends. I lost 5 friends and a family member to suicide during lockdown because Melbourne had the world's longest lockdown. And so this was in play already before, but such is my desire to give back, to help people connect, whether, not even to say this is F5.6 or whatever, many people do that better than me, but to connect people back with nature and creatively and corporates and school kids or whatever, that I designed a home and then said to my wife, I'm opening it to the world at some level. Can you imagine how that went down? You know, it's like she's going, you go to get a bottle of wine and you're gone for 4 hours because you make a new friend. You know, it's because, you know, so but that's how I see my role. I was never motivated. I was so unmotivated by brand and success and everything that I got exploited. My work got exploited. I got exploited time and time and time again, to the point where the financial losses were devastating, but I didn't become bitter. That's not who I am. I got devastated and sometimes quite angry, but I just had to keep moving, going, well, that's just how the world is. And this is what happens for people in life, in any walk in life. I mean, I've tried in my entire career, in every presentation I've given or any engagement I've had with people, to make every single person who picks up an iPhone or a camera think that they are capable of doing what I'm capable of doing. Because photography in one form or another is the most popular pastime on earth. It surpassed fishing and golf about 7 or 8 years ago. People love to translate the story. Indigenous Australians, Aborigines, 60,000 years of continuous habitation, the longest culture on earth. They've been painting, telling stories for 60,000 years. What we do now, whether it's illustration, but just talking about photography, that's how we tell our stories now. So I don't want people to think that they can't tell a story, that they can't do what I do, that there aren't opportunities for them to get into Geographic or to do an exhibition or to do their own book or to go on holiday and create or to get an image that they're going to be proud of. Because let's be really honest here, photography is a selfish pastime. I picked a pastime that made purely on these criteria. I love to create. I love to tell stories. I love to explore. I love to travel. I love to share. I didn't make that list. It was just who I was as a kid. But the constant in those 5 points, which I've never actually said out loud before, is I. So I created a career and a world around myself that made me happy. That was the thing. And there was no guarantee of success, financial and or otherwise. So now as I go through life, I'm trying to help people understand that you can do this. Or if they've taken a shot, it's like, not my way's not the best way, but this leads you out of the story, or this, or, oh my God, I wish I'd shot that. Genuinely, do I wish I'd shot that? People who've never picked up a camera before get award-winning photos and things like that. But that's what I want people to think. I think the world's become very difficult in that, especially social media has created an environment where if you don't have numbers and followers or whatever the case is, there's a perceived lack of value or worth in that. And in the last, even though I've been traveling hard, I had 20 months of back-to-back after coming out of lockdown. I've struggled to get back into the social media space the way I was and communicate and laugh and joke and everything, because it was so hard for me, my mental health being in lockdown. We weren't allowed to leave our houses, and I lived right in the city for 2 years, so for me, it was like, I just need to find my craft again. I need to find myself again. And the first trip that National Geographic put me on, and they hadn't even realized they'd forgotten to tell me the trip was on. They just rang up and said, your debrief meeting is 2 days from now. And I went, okay. And I went back to Antarctica. So I had to fly 75 hours back to the southern tip of South America. I get on a boat, the team's there, and they said, Jace, what do you need? What do you want? What are we going to do? What do you want? What do you want out of this? And my response was 6 frames and to see myself in the mirror. And they didn't even know where to go with that. And I just went, 6 frames, not even the best frames I've ever taken in my life, just 6 frames where I feel like I created, because I didn't pick up the camera for 2 years. I didn't even have the heart to look at the 9 assignments that I shot in the year prior to COVID, during the COVID lockdown. I was that broken creatively and seeing people suffer and everything. So I said, I just hope for 6 frames and to see myself in the mirror, me in the mirror again, because we all lose ourselves. Success is anyone who thinks that success is a cure-all for all the things that make us human. I'm sorry to burst that bubble for you, but for very few people is that the case. I'm in Antarctica. It's the bucket list place of everything. I was happy to be there. We sailed south, and I'm happy at some point to give you the shot if you want to see it. It's and this tea-coloured pillars are 30 miles apart appeared, and that's all I do is I chase light. So I'm on looking off the deck of the ship, and they brought the most perfect rainbow. And I went bang and I shot it. I jumped on the satellite phone and I'm crying. My wife's going, my wife was pretty happy to hear me back. And I rang her about 7 times on that shoot on the sat phone. And in the end, she's tapping away on her corporate life on the computer. And she's going, I love you. I love hearing you back. But I got to do some work. You've got to stop crying on the phone and telling me how nice the light is. But it was tough. It was tough. Life's tough like that. It's tough for all of us. And so I think in everything in life, I think people need to give themselves. And I'm not good at this, so I'm not preaching. I'm not good at this, but people need to give themselves a moment's pause. That's what I need now in life. I don't want to stop shooting or anything like that. But I've worked hard for years trying to say, I don't have to take every scene now. I can watch it, or I can enjoy it, I can absorb it, I can listen to, the prayers on now. The imams are calling people to prayer in the background as we speak now. And it's like we need to be kinder to ourselves and to others around, and realize that at the end of the day, the time that we have, to your point, we don't have the time that we think that we have. We just don't have it. I wasn't scared of my mortality. Oh my God, the stuff I've done in my life, I should have been wiped out about 75 times, but for me, I've always been aware of my mortality, and this sounds a bit esoteric, but for me, mortality was always a giant, black, shaggy dog type of wolf that is physically in my brain. And sometimes when things are really bad and people are shooting at me with machine guns in the Congo or whatever the case is, that wolf's in the same valley with me, and other times I hear a howl on the wind or whatever. I can't even hear it. It's something like that. So I've gone through life trying to fill every moment. That's how I do it. I wake up in the morning and there's always something to learn or something to read or something to shoot or go for a swim or do if I'm at home or spend time with my family or whatever. But I don't like regret, and I don't like what if. If you were to ask me what are your true criteria that you're afraid of, that'd be it. I'm terrified of both of those, and I have them, of course, but I work really hard at not. My personality type is very easy. It's very easy to get into that bucket with those two companions, and very, very difficult to get out. So it doesn't mean I go through life going, I don't care, this is what I'm doing, whatever. No, I'm brutally aware of my actions, my influence on the wildlife, the people, the cultures, the responsibility I have to those cultures. When there's a solid lack of understanding that gets manifested by the media for an agenda, all of those sorts of things. I'm the person that's meant to break down that barrier. I'm the one that changes people's hearts and souls if no one else can get there. So it's like I fill that time proactively and then just hope at the end of the day that my small contribution, in helping people see the world differently or laughing or going, wow, that's beautiful or that's amazing, changes their life. But simultaneously saying to everyone, I'm not special. Maybe I've got a little bit more skill than you, or maybe I see the light better than you. I'm good at reading natural light. I can't do studio work for love or money. I mean, you're sitting there with a great light on your face. I'm sitting here, in Marrakesh against the white wall with the sunlight coming through. Hopefully I look okay, not too haggard, but
You look exactly. For some people are only getting the audio of this and not seeing the video. So just for those who can't see, this man looks whatever you're picturing as a National Geographic photographer who goes all over the world and risks his life and like flies in danger. That's what I'm looking at right now. He is a perfect picture of that. So I'm glad you had your rough night because you portrayed yourself properly.
Thanks, buddy. I mean, it's interesting when I fly back, I go Marrakesh, Madrid, London, Sydney, Melbourne, which for, all in one hit, and it's probably 40 hours or something. I don't know. I do long haul in economy well, but I'm thinking to myself that London, Sydney flight, I suspect that I'm going to have 2 glasses of bubbles and then wake up in Sydney. That's my goal. But for the people who follow you and what you do is amazing.
Thank
In
you.
full disclosure, when you reached out to me, I was incredibly honored because I'd already bought the book. I read it twice. Your stuff has been popping up on my feed for a long time. So it was. I've given. I gave my copy of your book to 2 other people to read. Because I need those reminders. I need those reminders. Just get it done. I'm notorious at having to-do lists. Get this done, feel this way, whatever. And in my own way, what you guys have done touched me because my life is one of juxtaposition. I mean, I'm very aware of broken relationships in the past, so I work monumentally hard at my marriage, work monumentally hard with my son. But then I will take off and go into unstable places or go to places where I've got infrastructure, but then there's that pressure, or I will try and take them. But to people out there who are sitting there going, well, I haven't got direction I've worked so hard and the success hasn't come to me. I just say, has there not been the growth that you think there has? Like if you looked at yourself in the third person, have you seen any successes along the way? Maybe they didn't evolve into what you wanted to, but that doesn't mean you're not capable of changing those things moving forward or using that part of you. Or if you don't know what you want to do, just sit down and think, what do I enjoy? Of course, there's financial restrictions for everyone and things like that, but health and happiness far exceed in my criteria. And I'm not saying that from some pedestal. because I've spent my last $2 on a lottery ticket about 57 times in my life. And then when I don't win, I'm really disappointed. It's like I'm really disappointed.
Are you
But
0 for 57 on the lottery
I
tickets?
am 0 for 57. Yeah.
Well, 58,
Um,
man, I believe in you.
yeah, that's right. But that's the thing. It's like, give yourself a break, get outside, take a walk or something like that, walk with your ankles in some water or something if you can do it. But also too, don't be afraid. It's very easy to be afraid to put yourself out there, to if you're a photographer or a creative or something and you're shooting, all you've got is an iPhone. It doesn't have to be the latest iPhone or an Android or something like that. And you have this desire to create, this desire to share. And maybe you live in an apartment complex, or maybe you live in the country or something, find your best 5 or 6 pictures that you think are the best. Don't worry about anyone else. Easier said than done. Print them out. Doesn't matter if you print them on your home printer or whatever, stick them on the wall for people walking past. You know, someone to have a look, break that barrier, and if nothing else, you feel good. I mean, this is the thing, it's you're doing something that takes you out of your comfort zone and you have no idea. If someone wants to know how to tell stories, this is the model I teach people. I teach people, show me 5 frames of a place you've been. 5 frames, not 6, not 7, not 25, 5. Okay, you can maybe give me 3 or 4, but then, because I ran a scholarship for National Geographic and the prize was someone coming to work with me on assignment. So I'm building this new place and I hope to reboot the scholarship so that I can have 10 people come and stay with me and help them. But the model is, show me a place you've been in 5 frames. Could be your bedroom, could be the local park over 4 seasons of the year. Doesn't have to be Budapest or Marrakesh or the African savannah. Could be a local intersection. It doesn't matter, but it's a really good model for helping you tell stories. It's like, be brutal, just shoot, shoot, shoot. And then, but is there a story here? Because that's how you get into National Geographic.
Well,
Can you tell stories? Yeah.
I'd certainly, I want to come back to to talk about the scholarship that you're offering in a moment. But first, one thing I wanted to do is I want to say thank you for the kind words about our work at GFDA. It's very humbling to me because you're a person, as you said, you have one of those jobs that like every little kid would like to have to a certain degree, I think as I was a college professor for a number of years, and I can't tell you how many of the students who came through the art department or, the communications department who were like, I'm going to be a photographer for National Geographic. And, I didn't have the knowledge back then to dash their dreams immediately, but certainly I would now. So for someone who's achieved what you have, I was unaware you had the book and all that stuff. So I'm very humbled and grateful for you to say those things. But I wanted to, well, I want to talk just briefly about this idea you've mentioned several times about a juxtaposition between what happens on the back end and the product that comes out. And the context that you've provided is in one place was process photography versus film photography versus digital photography. And everybody's a photographer now because we all walk around with fairly decent cameras in our pockets, and the desserts of the world are finally getting their 15 minutes of fame on social media. You can go through all of that. You can take all of those steps. You can learn all of that stuff and come out at the other end and be fundamentally no better an artist, no better a photographer than you were when you started.
Mhm.
And maybe you pick up a phone and see something you like and take a picture of it, and it's makes people cry or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's not formulaic, and you're not going to start out and have a map with a dotted line that's like, I am here. I have nothing. I have no experience. I have no knowledge, no ability. And I just follow this whole path. And at the other end of it, at the X, there's
Mhm.
fame and fortune and a great career. That's not the way that it works. And you
Correct.
can follow that path and have absolutely nothing, get to the end of it and go get a job doing something else. And there's the differentiating factor for a lot of the people who are listening and who aspire to achieve something monumental in their lives,
Mm.
the differentiating factor is what you hear inside of yourself. That's the difference. Because what's inside of you is a raging torrent of humanity that's experiencing all types of incredible, terrible, magical, wonderful, horrifying things,
Mm.
and that's reflective of the world around you, a violent and beautiful, amazing world. And when you can learn to feel what's rising up in you and what you're responding to when you have these events of your life, being able to process that in any way, shape, or form is what is going to lead you to creating something worthwhile that's going to have meaning for other people. And the reason it matters for your story is because you're one of those lucky people who is able to sort of like tap into that when you were a little kid. You were born with less of a filter of the world's expectations, maybe.
Correct. And 100%. And whirlwind, I think, is the right terminology for what often happens in my brain, how I see the world. One of the things that became difficult in my relationships earlier, not so much with my wife now, but was that once I turned on that 24/36 and I saw the world in that consciously as opposed to unconsciously, I couldn't turn it off. And it's now like I could have shot 1,000 frames of you sitting here on the screen, ting, 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 ting. That whirlwind there means that when I land in a site or I've got a camera slung over my shoulder, I'm seeing all the time and I'm creating, and it's not formulaic, depending on what I'm seeing, maybe the light's bouncing off powders in a market, or maybe it's a wing beat of a butterfly or whatever the case might be. But it took many, many years for me to not stop, but to control that overwhelming element of my life. And so, friends or partners will say, I was a nightmare 2 weeks before I went. This was during my times at the zoo. 2 weeks before I went on assignment and 2 weeks after I came back. So I'd be like, they'd be going, you're antsy, you're prepping, you're already physically gone, you're mentally gone already, but you're here for 2 weeks. That's terrible for the person that you're with. Then I'd be on assignment. They had no way of contacting me. Then I'd come back and I'd be in that transition back into life where I sometimes wanted to be back in Africa or wherever. That's bad for the people around you as well. But that's what it took. It took an extra 4 weeks of trying to, compress that tornado of creativity and how I saw the world. When The Adventures of Walter Mitty came out, with Ben Stiller in it. Have you seen it?
I haven't
Yeah.
seen it, but familiar with it. Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, should watch it. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful movie. But anyway, I won't let any cats out of the bag for you, but people would have seen it. But it was interesting because some people who thought they knew me well were going, "Oh my God, you're like Walter Mitty," when the movie came out. I went, "Am I? I don't really know if I am." I could understand why they were saying that because of what happens to him in the movie. But then other people, it's hard to say this because if any of your listeners haven't seen the movie, go and watch it on Netflix or something. It's amazing. But Sean Penn has a character in the movie, and something happens to Sean Penn where he misses an opportunity and where he is psychologically with that missed opportunity. When I watched that, I found it quite touching because that was decades of my whirlwind where I'd like to think now I'm at that point, not completely at that point where he's at, but a similar point where there's a bigger umbrella here to who I am as a person and how I see things. And if I miss things, it's not going to be some soul crushing defeat that I lump on myself with a very large shovel. So watch the movie and hopefully that makes more sense. But it is one of those, again, it comes down to those, when people are so driven to succeed in whatever it is that they find that they want to be successful at, there's nothing wrong with that at all. Obviously, that's what drives humanity forward. But I think, let me think about how I say this next sentence. I think, at least from my perspective, I went about it in a different way to pretty much anyone I know at Geographic, in that for me, I'm a true believer in what Geographic has achieved over its 140 plus years, and the ability of what we can achieve together. And we're part of Disney now. You may or may not know that. And I've had those meetings with Disney saying, we have opportunity here to do X, Y, and Z. Whether I'm part of that opportunity or not, is, I am in some ways, obviously, because I'm with Geographic. But what I mean by that is that people should not give up hope of how we can influence the world around us, for better or for worse, but also to create successes out of that. I mean, you don't become strong by victimizing the weak. Every deal doesn't have to be a killer deal so that you can afford the latest Bentley or something. People are successful like that. I ride a bike. It's like, I live in the city, I ride a bike. I use the monies that I make and everything for trying to make change in the world, and for supporting my family and my friends. Would I like a brand new Jeep Wrangler Rubicon? Yeah, Jeep, if you're listening, I've had Jeeps in the past. They're amazing. I don't have one now. I have a bike. So I'd love a Jeep. But, but I say that partly in jest, just for the record.
Yeah, I'll take a Toyota instead, but maybe
Yeah.
they'll reach out and we can make a
Yeah, we'll
list.
work it out.
Yeah,
Because winter's coming down in the southern, in down under. Winter's on its way, so that bike gets a little cold and wet in winter.
I can imagine.
But it is one of those things that I think, when people are searching for something, your book's a good example. Let me skin this a different way. Let me skin this cat a different way. One of the things that I love the most about what you guys did in the book, or what you did in the book, is that it boils down everything to the minutia. It throws a lot of that excess material out of there that we all get caught up in. I read your book twice, as I said, and I'd read it before I'd go to bed. So I'd be in bed reading your book, because I needed those reminders, because I'm always writing lists. I'm always getting on planes. There's too much to do. So your book was like this, moment for me. And I try and live by certain elements in that book, because that's how it is being successful in life. You can only do so much. Now, this is me saying this at my point in the career, where for decades I've been trying to do it all. I've been trying to be the marketer. I've been trying to be the publicist. I've been trying to do the post-production. Even if I've had assistants, there's so much that needs doing. So if you want to be, and I say this with all humility, if you want to be successful, you really need to boil it down into what you think you want to be successful at. So what do you love? What do you want to be? Do you want to be successful at what you love? Because sometimes that's not the case. But if you want to do what you love and you want to be successful at it, okay, do you have the skill set to do that? Or can you learn the skill set? Or can you just do the hard slog? Your dotted line analogy is perfect, because in my book, it's just coming out in the States this year. I wrote a piece, not a whole piece, just a couple of sentences, about the old dot to dot drawings that we used to do as kids. And what you hope is you go one, and then you've got to find two, you've got to find three, you've got to find 17, whatever. In my life, I hope that when I get to the end of my life, my dot to dot drawing is one that I still find interesting. That's how I look at it. It's as simple as that. I didn't set out to be geographic. I set out to be a pilot. But my house was a halfway house for injured wildlife that my father would find on the road when he was a truck driver. So I had 27 tanks of snakes and frogs and everything growing up, and then I went to school. I was fascinated with nature, but I didn't know I was going to suddenly be taking pictures at 8 and then again at 14 or anything like that. Didn't know that I was going to form a stock agency at Melbourne Zoo. I got abandoned by my class at Melbourne Zoo when I was 12. I got left behind. At 18, I walked through the front door as a zookeeper. I didn't know that I was suddenly going to be shooting things for Australian Geographic or BBC or whatever. And then, you can't plan these things. And I think that's important. You can plan so much and say, this is what I want, and what can I do to do those goals. But if you think that you can control the unlimited potentials of life, then I'm sorry, but you're wrong. You just can't. You can't see what's coming. You've got to be able to ride it through the tough times, ride it around the corners you can't see coming. For me, I always take the past least travel. That's probably why, I could be more successful at business if I actually took probably some of the paths people said I should take. But I went, that one's got spikes and rocks and disease, and it's got all of those sorts of things. But what if I find some bug in a puddle that no one's ever going to publish, and I'm going to spend all my money photographing that puddle. Yeah, what the hell? Let's go down that one. It's like you can't work it out, so life's short, there has to be laughter and love and tears and all of those sorts of things that we do. And at the same point in time, take people on a journey with you. Everyone needs to do that. We're storytellers. Every human is a storyteller. It's like
Well,
your successful business,
so
that's great.
that's actually a good point for my next question, is that for somebody that's got this incredible dream career where you get to do what you do with, figuring in the malaria and all that, but what motivated you to write a book? Because writing a book's a pretty big pain in the ass.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And it always sounds so much better when you say ass versus how the British and the Australians say the same phrase. Um, but I mean, it was ever so when we do a shoot or however whatever work we're doing, the editors would take what they wanted to go into the archives at National Geographic, and we'd use it for the magazine or TV or whatever the case might be. And so my collection, just by the way I shoot, not because I'm riding the motor drive, my collection is very diverse, and my field collection is the equal largest of any photographer, myself and another guy in Nat Geo's history in the archives. So every time I would go to Washington, they'd say, "Where's the book? Where's the monograph? Where's the series?" And I'd say, "Where's the money?" And they'd say, "Well, we don't have money to do that. You need to do that." And I'd say, "Okay, but if I find money, I'm going to go off and do a shoot of which you're going to get the gear, the images for." "Oh, you go and do the shoot." So then I got to a point in 2018 where I said, what are the 5 core things that are important to me in my life? No particular order. I call it my pentagram of evil, but it's not evil, but that's what I like to call it because it makes it sound cooler. National Geographic, obviously. National Geographic, doing some work in publishing of my own work, the TV work that I do for Geographic and others, where, I became the face of National Geographic channel for 40% of the planet. When I can, I try and take people into the field in Africa and other parts of the world. I'm on a shoot, but I take them in and help them reconnect with nature. Don't do it too often, but I try and squeeze it in. And my property down the coast, which, as I discussed, was my wife's now on board, but where I'm going to create a space for family, friends, and other people to come. So they're my 5 things. With your expertise, I hope I'm right, that if I do all of those things well, they should all feed each other, because, that's how I see it. So I sat down one day with a glass of wine, lots of alcohol in this episode, isn't there? Sat down and I went, what would I do a book on? So why not do a book on the stories that meant something to me? Again, all about me, but I'm the hammer. I have no ego. No, well, I do a little bit, but it's like, in the Buddhist sense, whenever I'm in Buddhist countries, especially places like Bhutan, they call me the Bodhisattva, the person who's earned the right to pass on but stays to help. So I'm very humbled by that, even if I don't think it's exactly right. But I'm the tool, the mechanism by which good can be done, even at the expense of myself. So when I looked at the stories, I wrote a list. 40 stories popped into my head without even looking at a single picture. I sat down, I said, here's a few of my favorites, gave them to some editors. I built a team myself. Geographic did not have the resources. So with the support of friends and around the world and everything, and some people who stepped up and said, hey, can we help you get this done? Can we help you get this train moving? Can we help you hire an editor or a designer or something like that? It was a community endeavor from people who believed in me, which was the most humbling thing outside becoming a parent that's happened to me. So I sat down there, I did the drafts on 16 stories. The book turned out to be this thick without too many pictures in it. And the text is not a lot, but they were stories that meant something to me from my perspective, because they're different to what the world sees of the imagery. So the editors then cut it in half and said, we need you to do 2. I'm going, I'm not paying for all of this. It's like, isn't this? Okay, fine, we'll do 2. So anyway, cut my long story short, we picked 8, and then the second 8 we looked at and went, wow, what if we split those in 4 and we add 4 and 4 to those, and we've got 3 volumes. But the book's called Icebergs to Iguanas, and it's not chronological. And there's stories on the Serengeti, my soul place where my ashes will be scattered. Shipbreaking in Western India, which I did when no one could do that back in the 90s. New Guinea, the Amazon, Antarctica, whatever. They're just my perspective of those stories, of how I saw them. And I keep a field journal, so there's field journal notes in. None of it's made up. It's all I wrote it. It's not chat GDP or anything like that. I wrote the book. The journal entries are out of my journals. And it won the ComArts. It was one of the winners in the ComArts books, just gone, so in 2020.
Congrats.
It's great for bicep curls. It's 3 kilos. It's like 7 pound or something, and it's just come out on Amazon in the US like now. Well, middle of this year. And I'm not too sure where we'll go to air, but I'll come into the US in the second half of this year and do some publicity around it. But again, it was just that storytelling. It's not like, look what I've done or anything like that. It was like, this is stuff that meant something to me, and here's the back end to it. And there's, the introduction is a lot of what we've talked about. This is sort of how I wound up here. And the back part is the thought process. It's like if I run the scholarship again, if I boot it up again, this is how I see every frame. Here's the 10 criteria. Does it change photography? Does it? I put it in the book because it's not a secret for me. I'm not one of these people. I will show anyone in the world a raw file I've taken or a negative. Photographers are so closed off by that because they go, oh, this is what I do. Look what I've created. And I say, show me the raw, show me the neg. I'm in and out of a picture in post-production in 17 seconds. I don't know how to do layers and dodging and burning or anything. And even when I had assistants pre-COVID, they weren't allowed to do it anyway. If my raws aren't good, they don't make the cut. I delete them, when I get back home or archive them or whatever. So the book has got Kodachrome 64 in there, in the same story that it's got the latest Nikon digital or whatever the case might be, because that story's been going for 30 years, more than 30 years. But I should show it how it is. It's like, that's the thing. I think it's so hard now for people to understand what's real anymore and what is manufactured in again, not only in social, but in general media or how they perceive people. I mean, I ride my bike in the pouring rain and sleet and everything like that. And I see guys my age sitting in a car and it's nice and warm and I sit there and go, I failed here. I should be able to buy a car like that at this point in my career. Like, seriously, I think that, I think it all the time. And then I think to myself, it's just water. It's the same water that fell on the backs of dinosaurs. No more water's been produced in billions of years. That water has been on dolphins and dinosaurs and inside humans and every other species. It's just water. I don't feel the weather anyway, I'll dry
Well,
off when I get or have a hot shower,
that car, when you on the very sad day when you must leave this earth, that car is going to probably be in a junkyard somewhere. It's going to be spare parts, but your work will continue to be rising up. And so I think that you made the right decision on what you invested yourself in. And
Mm.
I got to say, Jason, I can see why you go out to, you go to the grocery store and wind up making a new friend. And to continue the alcohol theme, you seem like you're the kind of guy that everybody wants to sit down next to him at the bar, like just you're full of stories and your perspective is so amazing. If I could, I see an analogy in who you are and the way you've lived your life. And I apologize because it's going to seem like it's a bit of a pun, but it's not. It's truly how I see you. I see you as an aperture of the life experience that you've had. You've opened yourself up to all these experiences on earth. I mean, just everywhere there's an opportunity, you have gone someplace and taken it in the minutia, the grandeur, all of it, it passes into you and it gets turned upside down and viewed from a perspective that's not accessible to the naked eye of everyone else. And what comes back out of you is something that has taken that experience and rendered it down to the power and the meaning of it. And that's not just true for your work, it's also true for your stories. It's true for how your life and your career have shaped you, as they very clearly have. You talk about how you approached your career and your drive at one point, and then how things changed for you at this point and this point and this point. It is, I'm certain it's something that shaped the lives of the people who are around you. And it has given you a life experience that is in its own way, um, in its own way, your life experience is a representation of this grander world experience is happening all around you. And in many ways, hearing your stories, your whole life is a work of art. It's like it's an editorial photograph of the living experience that you've had, and it's wonderful. I am so regretful that we don't have like 7 hours to just. I want to hear all of it, and I really hope that you can find time to sit down again sometime and we can talk about more stories. I would truly love that. But unfortunately, I've asked you for a certain amount of time today, and I know you're a very busy guy. But I have a couple more questions for you, very briefly. The first question is, in a life of so many accomplishments, what do you consider to be your greatest success?
My relationship with my son. Simple as that. It's everything else pales into insignificance. It's just that. No, nothing more. There's nothing I could do in my life that we have a wonderful, wonderful relationship, and yeah, yeah. I should stop there because I'm not home yet, and yeah. So my son, yeah,
Well, congratulations on that accomplishment, my
yeah,
friend.
yeah,
That's important work that you've done there.
yeah.
My
Thank you.
second question for you is, what is the most difficult thing you've ever had to do in your life?
Walk out on my son and my wife to go on assignment. Yeah, yeah, easily. Um, to go out the door. eh, he's a teenager now, and it's still hard. And we're so close, but he knows I'm an emotional kind of guy, and so he manages me well. But for all of those years, once I did start traveling again, it was soul destroying for both of us, and walking out the door was the hardest thing, because of course where I was going on many occasions, there was no guarantee that I would come back, or that I'd be well when I came back, or in one piece, or that emotionally I'd achieve my goals creatively, and all of those sorts of things. There was just so many unknowns, and when you walk out the door and there's a taxi waiting for you, or they came to the airport or something like that, I mean, the people at the airport know me sometimes, and during those years, that there was some pretty upset people when they watched those departures and stuff like that. But just you can't make, I couldn't make him promises, not that he ever asked for them, but, once or twice maybe, but I just couldn't. So I always said, I remember once he said, promise me you'll be careful here, there, or wherever I was on that assignment. It'd be in one of my journals somewhere. And I said, buddy, we don't promise about those things. Um, but I'll do my best. I'll do my best, and as a small kid, he'd say, okay, do your best. That's great, because that's enough for a child, that you're going to do your best, so that was sort of always the hardest, those two elements of my life. I mean, if I was to extrapolate it and a creative thing, people should really understand that, we all pitch 1,000. I mean, you would know this. We all make 1,000 pitches. Doesn't matter whether it's a story pitch or a project pitch or a promotion pitch or whatever. Some of those can be brutal when you see who ends up getting the work, without explanation about why you didn't get it, and things like that. So creatively, when I've done, I mean, yeah, I'd love to catch up again. By the way, we should catch up again. But you can spend years doing a story and then it doesn't get picked up, or you get yelled at or whatever. It's like those things. Those, people people, there seems to be a perspective that people don't think that people who are successful have had knockbacks, but that's not true. It's how they come back from the knockbacks and whether they have it in them to stand up again and stand up again and stand up again and stand up again. And there's things in my career that I wanted to achieve that as I got older, I realized, does that mean that much to me anymore? I want this now? I want this, would I have liked that? Yes, but could I play the political game, or was I there enough, or whatever the case, to make that happen? So some of those losses have been tough, but I just had to keep moving. I just had to keep moving because I didn't want to give up a life on the road. So for people who are listening who get these knockbacks, and sometimes it is endless, it's not always going to be that way. But sometimes the storm can be pretty thick and pretty terrible. So just take one day at a time, one knockback at a time. Try and take the advice. If you're given advice when you get a knockback, try and take that advice and look at it clinically. Once the emotional hurt settles down, no one's there to hold your hand in life. Your friends and your family and your partners are, or some people, but when you're in business, my editors aren't there that's not their role. They're there to do their job, and I'm there to do mine. So yeah, creatively doing some stories that I genuinely thought were worthy, and others didn't. That was pretty tough. But here I am, still on the road. Still doing the miles. Still looking haggard. It's like, that's the thing. But yeah, it's a way of life, my friend. It's a way of life.
First of all, I want to say that I'm sure your son's proud of you because you're just a hell of a guy and you're sensitive and I'm sure you're a great dad. You got a big heart, and I'm sure you've raised an excellent young man, and that he knows he's sharing his dad with the world, and that he's very proud of you. And I would I just want to tell you that I consider it a great privilege to have spoken to you today, and to hear a tiny little part of your story and been able to share it with other people. And we'll definitely do it again if we can make it happen. But I'd like to know, how would you like people to connect with you in the world? I can certainly put a link to your book in the usual places down below, but what are the connections you'd like to make?
Social is great. I mean, it's one of those things. As I said, I'm slowly building that back up again. I mean, icebergs to iguanas is out in the US by the time we go to air and things like that. So if you're interested in seeing some of the insanity in real life, go to Amazon, or later in the year it'll be at some other chains and everything as well. But also too, if people reach out to me, I'm a pretty open book. It's if people reach out to me sometimes via my website, or on social and things like that. I always try and come back to everyone. I'm a bit like Ringo Starr in that way. But if I don't get back to you, please don't think that I'm ignoring you or anything. I never turn out of office on, and and I'm terrible at responding on social media because
Yeah, well, if he
I,
doesn't get
I
back to
get
you guys, he's in the middle of some like really crazy place,
yeah.
fighting five illnesses and getting shot at,
Then,
and so but he'll get
yeah.
back. Give him 5 minutes, he'll get
Oh,
back.
okay. Or just annoy me. Just annoy me at some point. I'll be back in Melbourne and things like that. But no, by all means, reach out to me in those platforms, or things like that, and the usual ways. But it's also too, it's one of those things that who knows, mate, if once I get the property finished and things like that, we might be able to do something and go out to people, and if I reboot the scholarship up once that's done, it might be interesting for people to, have the opportunity to come and spend some time, doing the kind of things that I do, I guess, and seeing the world a little bit in that way. But I really appreciate the opportunity to spend time with you. Again, I've been a fan from afar. And it was a conscious decision of mine not to flagged that when we first connected. I just sort of wanted to have this opportunity and to connect with you and hear the world from your perspective, which, to throw it back at you, one thing I'm very aware of, and I'm sure you are as well, and if you're not, I'm telling you that you should be, that, we never know. People never know what impact they're having on people outside, even on our most intimate circles. But, the work that you guys have done, and hopefully the work that I've done, it does change people's lives, and it can lift them up or make them think, and maybe that person reads something that you've written and they sit in the traffic that morning and then they're not doing a road rage, and then the person that they've upset, they're not yelling at someone that works for them or something, and they go home that night and they've had a better day, and then they play with the kids or they do whatever. I mean, everything in life is connected, and shouldn't all be a competition. So, my thank you to you for reaching out to me, and for the wisdom that you guys have shared over the years. It's been funny and humorous and poignant, and all of those sorts of things. And for everyone that's listening, I hope I didn't sound too Pollyanna or anything like that. Life's an adventure for all of us, and we're not, every day comes, we take it as we can, and go well, be safe, love, laugh, cry. And if you're a photographer or you're not, but you've got an iPhone or something, just take pictures that make you happy. Don't worry about anyone else. Share your vision with the world or share it with yourself. And, love you all.
Excellent. Well, that's as good a point to end on as I think we can arrive at. So, Jason, thank you for all your kind words, and thank you again for your time and everything you shared with us. And thank you to everybody who's listened. We'll talk to you next time.